in the entire coronavirus conversation, the Liberty Society conversation is this thing underneath that it's stunning to see so many people willing to say, yeah, we don't need any of that. It's the attack on the protesters that's first. I'm not saying protesters shouldn't have been 6 feet apart and protesters shouldn't have been wearing masks. Be 6 feet apart and wear masks. But the idea that we're opposed to protesters, well, that's a very peculiar thing to say. It was the author Neil Shusterman who said that the protesters were selfish. They're not selfish. And they weren't protesting the idea of social distancing. They're protesting the idea that we shut down society over coronavirus. And there is, to this moment, not a single data point that can be pointed to that shutting down society was the right move. We can argue that the idea of staying 6 feet away from each other, that very well may be the right move. Keeping people who are sick at home, the right move. But shutting down society, we don't have anything for that. As a matter of fact, we're starting to see whether or not we've actually done more damage than we've done good. I get it. It's a pandemic and this virus, and everyone lost their mind. The one thing we can't lose is the Constitution. The one thing we cannot allow a virus to do is to take away the Liberty Society. The Liberty Society must reign. It's the thing, well, that keeps us free. Yes, the Constitution exists even in a pandemic, and I know that's hard for a lot of people. That's why this was so shocking. This is a headline from The Atlantic, and the headline from The Atlantic reads, "Internet speech will never go back to normal," and the slug there, if you will, is in the debate over freedom versus control of the global network, China was largely correct, and the U.S. was wrong. Yeah, I was as shocked and stunned and sickened as you may very well be, but understand what it is that they're saying to you in this. In the great debate of the past 2 decades about freedom versus control of the network, this from The Atlantic, China was largely right and the United States was largely wrong. Significant monitoring and speech control are inevitable components of a mature and flourishing internet, and governments must play a large role in these practices to ensure the internet is compatible with society's norms and values. Freedom is society's norm and value. China goes against the norms. This is a pretty easy thing to understand if indeed you do believe in the Liberty Society. The authoritarian nature of China, the authoritarian nature of Russia, the authoritarian nature of Iran go against the norms, which is you have the right to live a free life. Now, living free, as I have always described it, is the ability to say no. If you can't say no, you can't be free. Some people say if you can't own real property, you can't be free. But it's the same basic theory. It's that if I have something and then someone else says they can take it from me, if I can't say no, well, then indeed I'm not free. Indeed, I'm something else. But the idea that somehow we have to get into this conversation, this belief, this theory that, and again, let's quote, "significant monitoring and speech control are inevitable components of a mature and flourishing internet." Well, does that make sense to you? We're not saying that there are things you could say on the internet and people be like, oh, that's terrible. We're arguing whether or not government should have the right to tell you what you can say on the internet. Now, we've seen this from YouTube, where the CEO of YouTube said, if someone's posting something that goes against the World Health Organization, we're going to take it down. But we know that the World Health Organization lied about coronavirus. They went about touting the Chinese line about where it came from and the idea of spread and things like that and contagion, whether they had things contained in and of itself. They went along these lines, and we know that that wasn't true. These aren't the facts as presented. So why would I ever listen to the World Health Organization? Clearly, there are other people, other doctors, other scientists I could be listening to, other experts I could be listening to, other people with thoughts and ideas that I could be listening to that are going to do me better than the World Health Organization, led by a doctor, Dr. Tedros, who is not even a doctor. So why would I trust them? Now, I know what you're saying. If you're not going to trust the World Health Organization, who are you going to trust? Well, I don't disagree with the generalized thesis. Everybody doesn't want to trust everybody these days. But what happens when they prove themselves untrustworthy? Well, I don't think I'm supposed to. Now, I'm not one of these people who's anti-science. I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of social distancing. And I have made the argument that we should have opened up society a couple of weeks ago, and that the market can figure out how to do these things. If Costco can figure out how to space you 6 feet apart, if supermarkets can figure out how to open just for people who are 60 and older, well, then restaurants, as we've been seeing in Houston, they can figure out how to open just taking reservations and placing more and more people apart. Not only restaurants, salons, and all sorts of businesses that I have not even considered how coronavirus has impacted them. But back to this article from The Atlantic, I want to share with you, well, this. We are about to find out how this trade-off will be managed in the United States. The surveillance and speech control responses to coronavirus and the private sector's collaboration with government in these efforts are a historic and very public experiment about how our constitutional culture will adjust to our digital future. Well, there's the fundamental problem. It's the idea that the Constitution should be making the change. I think this is what they meant. That somehow we, viewing the Constitution, are going to have to make changes to what we mean about free speech in a free society. And the answer is no. Free speech is better than controlled speech. More speech is always better than less speech. And yes, even in a pandemic, it is important that the American people are able to engage their rights. All of them, those that are enumerated in the Constitution and those that come from nature and nature's law. Nature and nature's law. Much better said, Tony. These things are important and imperative, and they exist in a pandemic. Yet there are lots of people out there, including the people who wrote this article in The Atlantic, who want to say, well, maybe not. Well, maybe they're wrong. As a matter of fact, there's no maybe. They are wrong. The Liberty Society must remain. It is the fundamental to who we are. It is the only way you can have a society that prospers and grows. There is no prosperity under China. Don't tell me about their GDP. Tell me about their authoritarian ways. Don't tell me that they've made such great investments into high-speed rail. Look how green they are. The pollution tells you otherwise. And most importantly, they throw you in jail if you say the wrong thing. If you don't have the right social credit score, which is you don't smile enough for the cameras they've got all over the place, you don't get to travel. Of course, being able to speak free is better than anything China has to offer. Now, if I say this on YouTube, do they pull the video down? Well, if you see this video on YouTube, well, then no, they haven't, and good for them. But if you don't see it on YouTube, then they did. And the question would be why? There's nothing wrong with free speech. As a matter of fact, it's the only speech worth having. And even during a pandemic, and even during a virus, and even during calamity, and even during rough times, free speech matters. The Liberty Society must remain. So no, the Constitution doesn't change to the digital trends. The Constitution is the constant. That's what matters. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Tony Katz Radio. And on YouTube, it's Tony Katz TV. You can find me there and be sure to subscribe. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.